small. Wow, tiny.
You are currently listening to Tiny Table,
where we explore TTRPGs you might not have heard of.
Whether big or small, we hope to cover them all.
Because we know that great things can come in tiny packages.
Hey there, gang. It's your boy, Skylar, and the following episode is our rules rundown for Protect the Child. If you already feel prepared to take on the daunting task of parenthood unaided, then feel free to hold hands, look both ways, and safely cross your way down to the actual play episodes. However, if it's your first time, you need a refresher, or you'd simply like to enjoy Julie's excellent explanation, then turn out all but the nightlight. Grab yourself and the kiddos a glass of warm milk, and we'll give you all you need to know. Now, just 5 more minutes.
Protect the Child knows that parenting is a truly monstrous undertaking. This Forged in the Dark game about monsters raising a human child will appeal to fans of Ice Age, Tokyo Godfathers, and Nimona. Humans have always drawn strict lines about themselves, rebuking that which they call monstrous. Nowhere is this ugly reflex more visible than in the presence of children. The young, the impressionable, the innocent and sainted children must, of course, be protected from all that is aberrant. In this modern world of monstrosity on the fringes, a world of vaping fairies and smarmy shadow salesmen, some small crew of unlucky monsters is about to have a human baby fall straight in their lap. You will play these creatures of claw and bone, of magic and mayhem, the exact kind of eclectic and awkward outcasts who are least prepared to care for an infant. What's worse, your charge is no ordinary kid. Forget the terrible twos. This little miracle is developing telepathy just in time for his 3rd birthday. You know, 'cause you were totally getting enough sleep beforehand. What you'll need. Protect the Child is a game for ideally 3 to 4 players, one of whom runs the game as the GM. When discussing page references in this introduction, we're referencing the page breakdowns on the Google Doc form for the 1.5 playtest, so please know that specific page numbers are subject to change. As always, we recommend all players read the rules in their entirety. If you're short on time, we recommend all players read the first 22 pages, spanning from the basics section to the breakdown of the setting, the child, and how to read your playbook. From there, skim the playbooks starting on page 22 and dive deep on whichever catches your fancy for your monstrous caretaker. With your playbook selected, you can read the Playing the Game section starting on page 49 through to the end of the Cycle of Play section, which ends on page 64. Game Masters should also read the Running the Game section starting on page 65. Games of Protect the Child can vary in length based on the scope of narrative the players want to explore. A single-session game is great for a snapshot in the lives of characters on the run, or to portray the short, sweet story of a lost kid finding their way home. A longer campaign of many sessions will allow you to slowly discover the evolving relationship between the child and the monsters that keep them safe. If you play for long enough, you may even get to watch your kid grow up from a helpless infant to a precocious youth to a troubled teen. For more details, check out the Age section on page 10. Any given session of Protect the Child can comfortably last several hours. We recommend including both runs and rest stops in each session to ensure you engage actively with the drama produced by the game's core mechanics. We'll get into the details on runs and rests in the Modes of Play section. To play Protect the Child, you'll need a copy of the game, some pens and paper, and a collection of 6-sided dice. Protect the Child is currently in playtesting, and its current version can be found at mint-rabbit.itch.io. If you're interested in another of Mint's games using the Forged in the Dark engine, check out A Terrible Fate, which invites you to portray cursed heroes in a doomed, time-looping world. This Majora's Mask-inspired adventure game will see you delving into decrepit dungeons to wake ancient spirits and forestall the world's ending. Mint also has a series of Google Sheets she creates for a wide variety of RPGs, including form-fillable character sheets, game expectation breakdowns, and campaign frameworks. If you want a spreadsheet for a system she hasn't diagrammed yet, you can contact her for commissions on @mint-rabbit.bluesky.social. She also runs the blog There's a TTRPG for that.tumblr.com, where she brings her archival game knowledge to those who crave particular games but know not where to look. Before we continue, a brief content warning. Protect the Child is a game about children living precarious lives. The tone can range from comedic to dramatic, but at its core, there will always be a child living a life on the margins, exposed to the dangers that entails. However, the child will never be subjected to grievous physical harm. As stated in the communication and care section, quote, "The only way they can get hurt is emotionally. There is no mechanical way to allow your child to die. This is on purpose," end quote. Other frequent themes for this game include social ostracization and child abandonment. Many of the player character playbooks are mechanically structured around monstrosity and otherness, providing tension for interactions with the child. In our own play, the child is a newly out teenage trans girl escaping an unaccepting family. All episodes feature the looming threat of transphobic parents, preachers, and police, all trying to find her and force her back into the closet. Core themes throughout include transphobia, homelessness, and early transition growing pains. Episode 1 features censored dead naming and a run-in with the police. Episode 2 features a depressive episode. Episode 3 features a focus on clothing-based dysphoria. And Episode 4 features blood, firearms, and monster-on-monster violence. Preparation. The preparation for a game of Protect the Child begins with a collaborative discussion on the game's concept, aim, tone, and subject matter, or CATS for short. Align on the high-level concept, describe the broad aims of your group of characters, touch on the tone that you're trying to strike, and outline the topics and themes that you want to engage with, alongside the ones that you'd rather avoid. Then, set to work on outlining the setting together. It's possible the GM will bring a pre-written quick start to the table, in which case they can outline the answers to these questions, then ask the table if they want any tweaks. The main questions to focus on are: who are your characters? What tech is available in this world? How magical is this setting? What's the scope of the narrative? And how do your characters relate to humans? These 5 questions will provide enough broad information for the players to create the story's child. The child of a game of Protect the Child is always special. Now, all children are special, we know this, but this kid's got something that makes them truly unique, a special ability that sets them apart from regular humans. When the table creates the child, you'll choose a starting age and a special ability that defines the kid. You'll all answer the following questions. How did our characters come across this child? How did the child become separated from their parents? What is this child's goal? The age you select for the child will determine which special abilities are available. A toddler may manifest telekinesis, while a tween might turn invisible. Different age ranges also have different tolerances for emotional strain. Infants have a full meltdown after taking any strain at all, while teenagers can tolerate a little more emotional confusion before they blow up. One last element to look into when creating the child is to go over the milestones for their age. These are major moments like learning to walk, making a friend their age, or going on a first date. And once the child has lived through them, they've grown from the experience. Check off all the milestones your child has already passed at their age, then familiarize yourself with the next upcoming milestones so you can be on the lookout for them during play. Finally, mark the child's trust clock at 1 and choose the lesson they start with. As we all unfortunately remember from our own youths, the lessons a child internalizes aren't always kind or correct. Pick from the following options: I am a burden, I am a monster, or I am in danger. Whichever you pick, you'll know the tough spot your kid is in at the start, mentally and possibly physically. Here's hoping some tender love and care from some unlikely outsiders can turn this kid's life around. When creating your character, start by selecting which kind of monster they are from the playbooks listed on page 22. Maybe you'll play a bruiser brute, the brawny beast with a big heart. Or maybe you'll go for the metal mentor, a practiced professional looking for a protege. Each playbook will provide you 3 questions to answer, These flesh out your character's history and motivation. From there, you'll mark your stats. These are as follows. Heart, your emotional connection and empathy. Muscle, your strength and physical prowess. Brain, your ability to think on your feet and problem solve. Tongue, your use of words to solve problems, from charm to threats. And claw, your manual dexterity for tool use and sleight of hand. Your playbook will assign you 1 pip each in 2 of these 5 stats, and you can then freely place a 3rd pip to customize your place in the archetype. Each playbook will give 1 ability by default, always related to the child. You'll also find a list of options from which you can select your character's 2nd ability. Abilities are demonstrations of your character's unique and monstrous talents. After your abilities are set, peruse your character's predefined gear and customize it for your creature. Each playbook starts with 4 of their 7 gear slots pre-listed with a broad archetype of items, such as something lucky or a repository of information. We'll get more into gear's effect on gameplay later on. Finally, you'll flesh out your character's connections, choosing or taking inspiration from the list of prefabricated NPCs on your playbook. From the list of 5, pick 1 as your character's positive relationship and another as a negative, and expand a little on where those situations stand when the game begins. Give your monster a name, and they're ready for action. Beyond preparing the child collaboratively with the table, not many additional prep tasks fall to the GM. Like many games forged in the dark, the GM's preparation is largely reactive to the player's whims. This isn't a game engine where the GM is expected to lay out particularities of each scenario in advance. Instead, think more broadly about the setting and the factions within it. It's not on your shoulders to prepare all this by yourself. The creation and elaboration of the factions is performed during Session 0, and different character playbooks get final say on different questions in the list on page 47. The Trick Taker will decide which faction really likes our gaggle of outcasts, while the Business Beast calls out which faction would be a needed ally. Fleshing out the factions will naturally lead to a few locations being described and named. Write these all down on a central document so the whole table can easily reference it during play. As a GM, your main role will be maintaining various clocks, each representing the evolving actions of different factions. We'll elaborate on clocks a little later on. The one thing you'll definitely want prepared is a hot start for our heroes. Jumping straight into the action forces the characters to engage with their monstrous abilities to contend with the immediate problem. This gets some clocks ticking, it introduces tension surrounding the child's trust, and it gives everyone action to later react to when they finally catch their breath during a rest stop. If you've got a sense for your setting, a lonely and curious child who needs protection, and a bold start that forces the monsters to act, you're ready to run a game of Protect the Child. Modes of play. Protect the Child has 2 modes of play, runs and rest stops. During a run, the action ratchets up as our characters brave a dangerous scenario. This might involve running from cops, stealing a super serum, or fighting off an opposing monstrous force. Rest stops are the quiet points in between runs, where your characters catch their breath, check in with themselves and each other, and slowly build their trust with the child. The moment-to-moment gameplay of a run revolves around the action roll. If your character ever decides to do something and it sensibly should work, they accomplish what they set out to do, no roll required. But when the consequences of failure are interesting, or it's unlikely the character would succeed, follow these steps to build your dice pool. First, consult your stats to determine which one matches your character's approach. Tell the GM which you intend to use, and add a number of dice to your pool equal to your pips in that stat. If you have no pips, subtract 1 die from the overall pool you eventually build. The GM may decide to make things difficult, spending 2 of their strings to subtract a die from your pool. We'll talk a little more about strings later. Once the basics of the approach and difficulty are set, consult your character sheet for additional assets you may have, such as useful gear or your special abilities. Each of these categories can potentially contribute a die to the pool if it's relevant to the task at hand. Other characters in the scene can also provide assistance, describing how they help and marking one's stress for themselves to give you 1 more die. Finally, you can choose whether you'd like to either push yourself or accept a devil's bargain. If you push yourself, mark 2 stress and add 1 more die. Alternately, a devil's bargain gives you a die in exchange for a negative consequence that will unfold regardless of if you succeed or fail the roll. Once you've built your pool of d6s, it's time to roll the bones. Roll all your dice and check for the highest result. If you have a dice pool of 0 dice, you'll roll 2 dice and take the lower result. On a 6, your character accomplishes what they set out to do. On a 4 or a 5, they do it, but there's some consequence or cost. The GM gains 2 strings. On a 1 to 3, they fail and have to deal with a consequence. The GM gains 3 strings. If you manage to roll multiple 6s, your character's accomplishment has an increased effect. Now, let's turn our attention to those strings we keep mentioning. Strings are the GM's main resource to generate tension during play. These can be spent in a variety of ways, from making a situation worse, to damaging a character's gear, to increasing the emotional strain of the child. Any action roll that doesn't result in a 6 is going to give the GM some strings, which they might spend right away to introduce some immediate consequences. But alternately, they can save those strings for use later on. Strings are fungible, and the strings gained from one failure might be used on a seemingly unrelated consequence later down the line. Think of them like a currency for dramatic tension. One notable use of strings directly related to action rolls is the GM's ability to make things worse. This ordinarily costs a string, but if the situation is particularly dire, the GM can do so for free. When things are made worse, all of the failure outcomes grant the GM 1 more string than they normally would. Include some dramatic detail as to why this particular action roll bears such heightened consequences. For the full list of reasons things can be made worse for free, see the list on page 60. If the roll turns sour and you really don't like the consequence that your character is about to face, you can opt to make a resistance roll. Your character has a number of pips in resistance, equal to the number of stats they have at least 1 pip in. Better rounded characters are better at dealing with the consequences life throws at them, while specialized characters are less likely to fail in the first place, provided they stick to what they know. When you make a resistance roll, roll d6 equal to your pips in resistance and select the highest result. Subtract that result from 6 and note the difference. Your character marks that much stress and successfully avoids the consequence. Now's the time to describe how your character overexerts themselves to narrowly avoid a nasty outcome. So far, we've mentioned the 3 main ways a character gains stress: pushing themselves on an action roll, helping someone else on their action roll, or resisting a bad outcome. Whenever your character takes stress, fill in that many wedges of their stress clock, which starts empty and caps at 6. If your character takes enough stress to exactly fill their clock, they've hit their threshold. While at the threshold, you cannot choose to use stress for beneficial effects until your character takes a reaction. When your character reacts, they lash out, they jump into danger, they let their emotions get the better of them, or somehow they just make things worse or more hazardous for the group. The boon of hitting the threshold is that you, the player, maintain control of when your character reacts. But if their stress clock goes past 6, they blow up. They react immediately. Once the dust clears and your character's reaction subsides, they reset their stress to 0. Unfortunately, such an outburst is liable to hurt the child's trust. Trust is represented by a clock on the child's sheet, and it begins play at 1. This represents the child's trust in the whole party of monsters. Each character also individually denotes on their sheet whether or not they currently have the child's trust. If the child gains trust when interacting with you, check if you already have their trust personally. If you do, add their trust to their overall trust clock for the party. If you don't currently have their trust, mark it on your own sheet. Your character can gain the child's trust by acknowledging their needs, keeping them out of harm's way, or caring about their feelings. You can also aim to build trust during a rest stop, which we'll discuss later. Your character will lose the child's trust if you place them in danger, ignore their opinions, or hurt their feelings through carelessness. Many character types have weaknesses that can also damage the child's trust if triggered. Your character's personal trust can also be invoked, and therefore spent, to force the child to do something you order without question. Young lady, go to your room. If the child falls below 2 marks of trust, they'll have an emotional outburst and mark strain. When a child hits their strain threshold, they'll have a major outburst, which inflicts 1d6 stress on the entire party. However, if the child ever fills their trust clock to a full 6, you learn a core piece of knowledge about the child, discuss what you've learned, and write it as a truth on the child's sheet. Learning a truth fleshes out the character of the child and helps them grow past some of their own negative lessons. All of these economies of abilities, stress, trust, and reactions play together most actively during the thrilling action of a run. At the start of a run, define the goal of the action and use it to create an end condition. This must answer the question, when is the child safe? Define your goal and then engage with the action at hand. Think creatively with your connections and your gear. Balance the power of your monstrous abilities with your desire to avoid scaring the child. The GM creates a clock for a possible bad ending for the run, like a 4-segment clock titled The Police Catch Up to You, or a longer 8-segment clock called Security Seals the Exits. Throughout a run, the GM will spend strings to make things worse, tick their clocks, and have the child act impulsively. Trust is tested, memories are made, and action waits around every turn during the tension of a run. But between these runs, our characters need time to catch their breath and recover. Rest stops punctuate the time between runs. This slower mode of play complements the action with chances to reflect, share meaningful character conversations, and deepen the relationship with the child. During a rest stop, pick one of the following 4 options: tend to the child, build trust, teach the child, or bond with each other. When you tend to the child, describe how you care for them and roll for a chance to help them clear some emotional strain. When you build trust, describe how you attempt to earn the child's confidence and roll for a chance to increase their trust clock. When you teach the child, describe what skill, hobby, or quality time you want to share with them, and roll for a chance to rewrite a negative lesson on their sheet into a more positive one, or write a new lesson entirely. Finally, you can bond with each other, sharing an open and extemporaneous conversation with a fellow PC. Your characters ask genuine questions of each other. If they choose to respond honestly, they both clear 3 stress and mark experience. If playing in long-form play over multiple sessions, you'll eventually portray the intermittent 3rd mode of play, time passes. This longer-term downtime allows for projects to be built upon, children to age, and new skills to be trained. See page 64 for the full breakdown of time passes and its many options between outings. But if you're going any longer than a one-shot, be sure to end every session with a refresh. Go over your playbook's prompts and mark an experience for each prompt you fulfilled during the session. If you fulfilled a prompt multiple times, mark 2 experience. Whenever a character's experience track fills, they clear it and either mark a new pip in a stat of their choice or take a new ability from their playbook's list. When the child's experience track fills, they shift a lesson into a truth, thereby internalizing something from the journey they've taken. Hopefully, they've learned to be a little kinder to themselves, despite everything. They also take a new ability or mark greater control over their current powers. Most excitingly, they take their next milestone. These major moments in a child's life each get their own scene, including prompting questions to help easily flesh out your table's portrayal. There is no image more iconic from this game than the moment a group of monsters and misfits watches their toddler take its first teetering steps. They grow up so fast. Legal. Protect the Child is written, designed, and laid out by Mint Rabbit. It is based on Blades in the Dark, product of 1-7 Design, developed and authored by John Harper, and licensed for use under the Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 Unported license. This podcast is based on the following game content created and owned by Mint Rabbit: Protect the Child Playtest 1.5, 2025, and Quick Start, Lily's Angels 1.5, 2025, available at mint-rabbit.itch.io. Tiny Table is an independent production by Tiny Table LLC. Now, you've got everything you need to play a game of Protect the Child. Bare your fangs, splay your claws, and remember, she really needs to be in bed by 8 or she won't get to sleep for hours. Okay, there's money for pizza over by the door. Okay, toodles!
Hi, and thank you for listening to our podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, then we'd really appreciate if you left us a review. If you really like what we do here and want to support us further, you can join us at patreon.com/tinytablepodcast. Our business email is also open for inquiries at tinytablebusiness@gmail.com, and all of our socials can be found in the episode description for any shenanigans you might want to follow. Till next time, see ya!